I think we are live.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Hardik. Hi and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm so excited to see some old faces and some new people in the room today. With me, I have an amazing speaker. But before that, a little bit about BITSAA Sahaaya. So this is the mental health initiative of BITSAA International, and it was launched on World Mental Health Day in October 2020. And since then, we have conducted over 15 webinars, and Saketh has been an integral part of that. He's the speaker today. Saketh did his bachelor's in pharmacy and master's in biotech from BITS Hyderabad. He's 2014 pass out. He's currently doing his PhD at the Center for Consciousness Studies at the Department of Neurophysiology at National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, more popularly known as NIMHANS. His PhD work is focused on understanding the impact of yoga and meditation on the brain. Today's session is part 2 of an ongoing series. And I know that some of us have already joined part 1 as well, who are here in the room. So thank you for being a part of this journey. Very excited to hear Saketh speak. We will have these ongoing series every month. So really excited to also have people join in moving forward. Thanks to Saketh, and over to you.
Thank you, Divya. I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Good evening. So this is part of the ongoing series on science of well-being, integrating modern neuroscience with Eastern wisdom. So my PhD, like as Divya mentioned, it's on understanding the impact of yoga and meditation practices on the brain. So through this work, I'm trying to integrate the vast wisdom of the Eastern traditions with the modern neuroscience and come up with something which will translate into, a lot of well-being benefits to a lot of people. So the first part we spoke about perception, nature of human experience, sensory deception, affect, interoception, the feeling of life, overview of well-being. So I'll also be quickly going through this part 1 again, probably in 5 to 10 minutes. And then I'll move on to the part 2, which is focused on spirituality, yoga, brain, neuroplasticity, interoception, mind-body connection, and components of well-being. So these are kind of connected with part 1 and not very independent. And then part 3 would focus on the mental well-being and other aspects of it. Part 4 on physical well-being, and part 5 on spiritual and ecological well-being. So this is the focus of this presentation. And I would like to tell that this is something which would have a subjective, my own subjective experiences also, like I would be sharing along this journey, because that's the reason I had enrolled for PhD and kind of doing this right now. So this is what will you gain from the series: proper understanding of well-being and its various components. What is mind? How does it work? And how to take charge of it. Source of suffering and how to transcend it. Because what we are looking at right now is suffering and various forms of suffering, and to understand that there's a possibility to transcend it. And living well, absolutely, thriving and flourishing, and the science of yogic practices, some simple yoga practices, which would take probably 5 to 10 minutes to practice every day, and various well-being methods. So that's the your takeaways, your probable takeaways from this series. So this is part of the part one, what I'm talking right now. So we started part one with the most important aspect of our lives, which is life itself, being alive. And after that, the feeling and experience of life. So we are not like zombies walking around, but rather we have a certain feeling and experience of life. The subjective experience of life is the most important thing. And this is what differentiates us from some other, probably if somebody develops a robot in the future, that robot would have everything that we have. It will probably have much more cognitive capabilities than we have, but it wouldn't have that experience and that feeling of life. So this is the most important thing of our life. And then we also discussed about, are we really feeling and experiencing this life or only thinking about life? So there's a lot of difference between living psychologically, that is thinking that what's happening in the mind is the reality, versus actually living it. So this is the psychological versus the existential aspect of our life. We also spoke about nature of human experience. As I said, this is the most valuable aspect of our life. And this human experience is 100% self-created. It is happening within us all the time. And how does it happen? So we live. So for us to live, we need to interact with the world around. So to interact with the world around, we need to get information from the world. We need to have access to the world. So brain is like, almost encased in a black box kind of thing with no direct interaction with the world around. So how does it get information from the world? It gets its information from the world from the 5 sense organs, which pass on the information in a particular format, and then the brain transforms that information into something phenomenal, and that leads to that experience, which is the most important aspect. And information from the external world enters, as I said, through the 5 sense organs of touch, sight, smell, taste, and hearing, and then it gets transformed into this experience, subjective experience, and this happens from within. So whatever we see around, if we just look around, we see a world full of color, we hear sounds, we hear music, we smell some beautiful aroma. Everything is a mental construction. It doesn't exist as it appears, and it does not exist as such outside the brain. So whatever we see, this rich, colorful image, it doesn't appear as it appears on the screen or as it appears in reality. Rather, the information enters the visual apparatus as an electromagnetic spectrum, electromagnetic waves, and then it gets transformed. Similarly, with all the other sense organs, sound, smell, taste, everything. So what's happening is very subjective as well. And this is not limited to just the perceptual experiences, but rather all human experiences happen from within. So there is this, the confusion is, it almost appears like everything is happening on the outside. It appears that we are looking at something colorfully on the outside, but rather the color is a construction of our own visual apparatus. For example, if somebody has color blindedness, they won't see the world colorfully as we do. So it's a simple demonstration of the fact that it's us who is creating this complex construction of the outside world. And this is not limited just to the perceptual experiences, but rather all human experiences happen from within. So all emotions that we go through, anger, joy, sadness, happiness, etc. All these are one's own creations, and these are happening mostly as unconscious reactions to outside events. So this aspect we will be focusing a lot in this 5-part series, because this is where we have a lot of choice. So the choice exists. For example, somebody talks to us in a very bad tone and kind of trying to elicit anger within us. So that moment we have a choice. So the unconscious reaction is to reply back in anger or to get affected by what the other person is saying, the tone in which the other person is speaking and all that. But we also have a choice that instance to not let that happen, but rather respond consciously that moment. So this choice exists for each one of us. And only when we exercise this choice every moment do we live well. And the root cause of all issues, as I told us, the whole confusion is this: the sensory organs are always outward bound, but human experience happens from within. So this is the source of confusion, and this leads to seeking well-being externally. And this is called as hedonic treadmill in psychology, wherein it's like running on a treadmill. If you keep running on the treadmill, it appears that we are going somewhere, but we don't go anywhere. Similarly, hedonic treadmill means we are constantly seeking well-being externally, thinking that well-being would happen, but it would never happen. And it's like we always keep going all around the world, like trying to pursue well-being, pursue happiness, pursue joy, etc. But it would never happen because the experience is happening within, but we are looking on the outside. That's the reason in yoga it is called as in is the only way out. So what this means is that looking within or turning inward is the only way out. Turning inward is the only way one can really live well, live joyfully. So the entire yogic process, the entire meditation traditions, all the meditation traditions are focused on turning a human being within so that he looks at the real thing. And everything that a human being does is in pursuit of pleasure, happiness, and joy. So every activity that we perform is in pursuit of these small pleasures, happiness, joy, and everything, fulfillment, meaning, etc. So the common underlying factor of all these things is all these are pleasant experiences. So when we do something which gives certain pleasantness, which causes certain pleasantness within, and we don't do something which causes unpleasantness. So we avoid those things which cause unpleasantness and try to do those things which cause pleasantness. So the common underlying factor is the pleasantness of experience. So this is called as affect. In neuroscience, this is called as affect, wherein affect is the basic sense of feeling. So right now, as we sit here, how do we feel within ourselves right now? Do we feel happy? Do we feel peaceful? Do we feel excited? So there's a range of feelings happening within us right now. So this basic sense of feeling is called as affect. And this is the most important thing. And this affect depends on interoception. So we'll come to interoception in this part of the series. And this interoception evolved for something called as allostasis. That is to regulate the bodily metabolic metabolism and bodily metabolic things. So that if something goes out of a particular range, it causes harm to the system. So to prevent that from happening, the brain has evolved mechanisms by which it always maintains certain important things in the physiological range, like the pH of the body or the temperature of the body, glucose levels, etc. So that's the reason interoception evolved. And this affect has two dimensions. This feeling within can be either pleasant or it can be unpleasant. And this has another component, which is arousal. So this could be low energy levels or high energy levels. So this is called as circumplex. So which has 4 quadrants. So the rightmost quadrant is the one wherein it's a positive, pleasant experience. At the same time, it's a high energy state, excited, delighted, joy, blissful. These are all very exuberant states kind of thing. And then the lower quadrant is more like low energy state, like more like, being peaceful, relaxed, calm, these kind of things. Similarly, the leftmost upper quadrant, there is unpleasant experience, but it's a very high energy state. It's like if you're furious, annoyed, it's a high energy state. At the same time, it's an unpleasant state. Similarly, with the this quadrant, wherein it's a low energy state, depression, for example, it's a low energy state, and also it's not something which is very pleasant. So different cultures have different preferences for these different experiences. For example, research shows that Western cultures, they are more fascinated with this high energy, pleasant states, and Eastern cultures are also this, but they also have more inclination towards this lower quadrant. And so whatever we do, we want to stay in this right side. We want this right side to be part of our experience all the time, and try to avoid the left side of the figure. So this is and how we feel within is very, very important, because how we feel within can influence every aspect of our lives, our thinking, our emotions, our behavior, how we interact with people. Everything depends on how we feel within ourselves. So if say we are really happy within, really joyful within, that reflects in every action of ours. And then it doesn't matter who it is, even if it's a stranger walking on the street and coming down to us to ask for something, we would be really happy to help, because we are really feeling really, really good within ourselves. And so well-being is nothing but the pleasantness within at different levels of the body, thoughts, emotions, and even the energy level, which is not dependent on anything externally. So anything dependent externally means it is kind of enslaved to that external thing. And that if that external thing is taken away, it leads to suffering and stress and fear of losing it. All these things happen. So if well-being is not dependent on anything externally, that's the real well-being which we are talking about. And how to attain that pleasantness within, is there a method to do that? So how to be in that state wherein you're always pleasant within yourself? Is there a method to do that? That's the entire focus of the yogic methods. And well-being is not just a pursuit, it happens as a consequence of doing the right things. So it's a consequence of doing the right things at the level of body, mind, which is thought, emotion, and also the energy. So there are various yogic practices which focus on these different aspects of who we consider ourselves to be. And one important thing which I would like to mention here is yoga, it's not just about pleasantness of experience, but rather pleasantness of experience creates the right foundation for a human being to explore further. So if something is unpleasant, there will be no exploration. So yogic sciences is all about exploration of life within to its ultimate. And for that, a certain pleasant atmosphere is very important. So the goal of yoga, all these things, is not the pleasantness of experience. And yes, but that's the brief overview of what we discussed in the last part. So coming to this part of the session. So before we progress, I thought of clarifying certain things, because there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to yoga, what yoga actually is, and how spirituality is different from religion. So to clear that misunderstanding, we would be talking briefly about these things, and then like set the stage for further exploration of this topic. So science and spirituality, it's actually not very different. So science and spirituality share a common foundation. That is, it taps into the innate human desire to explore, innate human desire to know something within himself and outside himself. So that there's an internal thing within a human being which wants to know everything, know what's happening in the universe. It wants to know what's happening within oneself, all these things. So science, I'm not going into this definitions and all that. So this is the classical definition of what we call as science, the study of and knowledge about the physical world and natural laws. So science confines itself to the exploration of the physical world and natural laws. Whereas spirituality is, we could term it as study of and knowledge about the non-physical world and the supernatural laws. So what is non-physical? We will come to it. And whatever is non-physical is supernatural, because the natural laws are only confined to the physicality of existence. They do not touch the supernatural aspects. And science is the bedrock of science is experimentation, observation, repeatability, etc., objectivity, etc. Similarly, even spirituality is about exploration, but the focus is within. It's an exploration. You do experiments just like a scientist who, like a scientist who does experiments on the outside world, and then he observes within himself what's happening, and then based on observation, all these very kind of meticulous observation of what's happening within, he comes up with certain laws, even within oneself. This is how it happens, kind of thing. And that's how we can come up with certain laws by which the mind functions, the mental realm functions. So science is all about the external seeking, outward focus, whereas spirituality is all about the internal seeking. That's why it's called as inner sciences. And the goal remains the same, the purpose remains the same, to know. For external well-being, for inner well-being, or rather ultimate well-being. So when we say just spirituality, it is something to do with experiencing something beyond the physical dimensions of who we are. So right now, in most people's experience, when we say myself, it includes body, mind, and energies. These are all physical dimensions of who we are. But with right practice and right methods, one can also experience a dimension within oneself which is not physical in nature. So this non-physical dimension of who we are is what we call as consciousness, what we call as divinity, God, whatever name we give it to it. It is that non-physical dimension of existence within us. So every human being has this both physical and the non-physical dimensions. It's only that some people would have never explored the other dimension of non-physicality within themselves, whereas others would have explored. That's the only difference. And there's no choice, because this non-physical dimension is anyways part of who we are. It's just that it needs to be tapped into and expressed. And what exactly is yoga? So if you just think of yoga, people think of all these kind of postures, impossible postures, which catch the imagination of popular eye. But yoga is not just physical postures. It's actually a very small part of yoga and yogic sciences. So it's not a practice, it's not an exercise form, it's not a technique, it's none of these things. It is coming to a point wherein one experiences the unity of existence. One lives in harmony with what's happening around. There's a proper synchronization of what's happening within and what's happening on the outside. So the boundaries of physical nature, they start getting dissolved to a certain extent, and then what is me and what is not me kind of get united. So yoga literally means union. So the word yoga derives from the Sanskrit root word called as yuj, which means to yoke or to unite or join. So literally yoga means union. And what are we uniting with? What are we joining? So right now in our experience, we clearly know what is me, and we know that this is other, this is me and this is the other. We have very clear understanding of this. That's because we have this sensations which are very limited to, limited to the body level. We don't have, say, if I touch the phone, this is not part of me because I don't have any sensations here, but rather I have sensations within myself, and I know where I'm sitting. I know I can feel the chair on which I'm sitting. I can feel my shirt touching my body, all these things. That's because I have sensations which are helping me know what is me and what is not me. So when this becomes united, what is me and what is not me becomes united. That's when we say a person is in yoga. And in that state, everything has become one. And that's the aim of this practice, aim of this science, I would say rather. And what unites with what? Me and the other. Yes. So this is not something which we are trying to achieve or trying to realize kind of thing, but rather unity is the existential thing. It's already, everything is already united. Only thing is we have to raise ourselves or work on ourselves so that we realize that unity of who we are. So this is even modern physics agrees with this. So this is the quote of Frank Wilczek, who is a Nobel laureate in physics. So he quotes, "Detailed study of matter reveals that our body and our brain, the physical platform of our self, is against all intuition built from the same stuff as non-self and appears to be continuous with it." So there is a continuity of who we are. There's nothing like, individual self and non-self. The self non-self thing is a very it's a creation of the brain to help in the survival process, because if you do not know what is me and what is not me, it is not good for the survival, and it puts in danger the whole probably species itself. So to prevent that from happening, brain has certain inbuilt mechanisms by which it creates this rigid boundary of who I am. And this individuality, however, can be transcended. That's the whole purpose of yoga. And that's what we are looking at right now. And yoga and spirituality, as I told, spirituality is experiencing a dimension within oneself which is not physical in nature, which is non-physical dimension of who we are. And yoga is the science and technology of transforming the human into the divine. So what we call as divinity is nothing but the non-physical nature, and what is non-physical is inclusive, because what is within me as a non-physical dimension is also within everybody else. So there's no boundary for that. So what doesn't have boundary is inclusive. And this is also conscious. So when we say somebody is conscious, that means that they're operating out of a certain intelligence within which does not have any memory to it. So right now, everything that we do is based on memory. So we'll be looking in the next few slides. Everything we do is based on the patterns. So everything starting from how we talk to people, how we sit, how we walk, how we generate thoughts, how we react unconsciously, to someone speaking in an angry tone to us. Everything is an unconscious pattern, and this unconscious pattern is ruling one's life throughout. So basically, it's the past which is influencing the present moment experience and thus shaping the future. So, however, when one is operating out of that conscious dimension of who we are, whatever the past might have been, one can distance oneself from the past and experience the present moment the way one wants to be. One can choose to experience the present moment with freedom. And when that happens, that influences the future as well. So basically, we can choose how to live. That's being conscious. And this choice is available only to human beings. And this is and this doesn't mean that other species do not have this dimension within themselves. They do have this dimension within themselves, but they can't experience as we do. They can't experience because they don't have certain certain evolutionary things which are available only to us. For example, this is for example, only we have these regions of the brain which are like especially the prefrontal regions, you could say, which are responsible to a certain extent in helping us access that dimension within ourselves. And the other species do not have this, evolutionary mechanisms to support that quest. And this experience of union with existence of oneness of all life is yoga, and this is the ultimate well-being which we are looking at. And there's one more very important thing which I need to mention before we talk anything further, because this is integration of neuroscience with Eastern wisdom. So Eastern wisdom, this Panchakoshas is one of the most fundamental things. So in this, a human being is seen to have different layers, and this doesn't mean the layers exist. It's like you cut open a person, you see these layers. It's not like that, but rather what it indicates is the movement from grossness to subtlety. So the body is the grossest form, like the physical body, and mind is a little more subtler in nature. And you go a little deeper, there is energy body, which is a little more subtler. Then there is Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is the wisdom shit, which is even more subtler. So it's the journey from the gross to subtle. So this Panchakoshas are also called as layers or bodies. So it starts from the outermost, which is called as the Annamaya Kosha, or the physical body. This physical body is basically the food we have eaten. That's how this body has grown big. And then there is a mental body, which is the mind, as we call it in our popular language. It's the mind or the mental body. And then there is energy body, which supports this body and the mind. And then there is Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is also called as the wisdom shit. But Vijnanamaya Kosha actually means it's the transition from the physical to the non-physical. So the first three bodies, the food body, energy body, and the mental body, they are still physical in nature. And then there's a transition from the physical to the non-physical dimensions. And that transitory layer is the Vijnanamaya Kosha. And the innermost core is called as the bliss body. And this is the non-physical dimension of who we are. And yoga says that And actually it is, it is very clear in research as well. Like we have tons of research to show this now. When the energy body is vibrant and dynamic, there can be no illness in the other two bodies, the physiological and the psychological spaces. So physiologically, still there can be illness because of infections and so many other things which we do not have much control about. But psychologically, there can't be any issue when the energy body is very vibrant. And there are a lot of yogic practices called as kriyas and all these things which work on at the level of energy body, and this keeps all mental issues at bay, kind of thing. And yoga is the science of aligning these three dimensions or these three bodies, so that the innermost core comes into one's experience. Yes. So having said that, I have not actually spoken about what is brain. So, and what is brain and what is mind? That's a source of confusion again. So brain is, like, as I told, it's one of the most fascinating organs, and human brain especially is really fascinating because of because of the cortical layer, and that's the reason why we have this abilities of self-regulation, thinking, judgment, like uh, enhanced levels of decision making and all these things. It's because of this cortical layer, and especially the prefrontal cortical layer. And the sole objective of the brain is to keep us alive and pass on the genes. So survival is the main focus of the brain, and memory and imagination are two of the most unique features of our brain. So no other species has the kind of memory and kind of imagination which we have. So imagination, if you say, especially the kind of abstract thinking which we have. So we are the only species who can think of something which does not exist in reality. So we can create all these beautiful abstract things in our minds, which is a gift. At the same time, it is also turning out to be a bane, because this memory and imagination is creating suffering, is what is creating suffering. And that's the reason we have to understand that what's happening psychologically is not the reality. What's happening right now psychologically is not the reality. Yeah. So what is mind? So mind, if you look from the neuroscience point of view, it it just means a complex set of operations which the brain carries out. There's actually not much understanding of what mind is in neuroscience. Whereas in yoga, mind, as I told, it's not seen as localized to a particular region of the body, but rather it is seen as spread right through the body. So that's why we call it as mental body in the yogic system. And I'll be coming into more detail about the mind in the next few slides. And this brain operates through networks. It's earlier the understanding was that brain operates through single particular regions. Say if you face fear, there's a particular brain region which gets activated, and for language there's another particular brain region, and for memory there's another particular brain region. But that's not how it works, but rather it functions as networks. Everything functions in networks. So there are many networks, starting from visual network to language network to executive network, attention network, limbic network, etc. And all these networks also interact with each other during different tasks. And the most fundamental property of the brain, and also the most empowering aspect of our brains, is neuroplasticity. And this is, brain is not something rigid. It's always evolving, it's always changing, adapting, modifying as we experience our everyday lives. Every moment is influencing the brain and the mind in some way or the other. And this neuroplasticity is highest in the early ages. So this is the crucial period, critical period of development wherein the plasticity is at its highest. So that's the reason how a child is brought up, what environment he is brought up, the kind of inputs he is given in the early age, what he does, what he doesn't do, all these things shape the rest of his life, because that's the period when most of the brain changes are happening and a lot of pruning is happening. Synaptic, there's something called a synaptic pruning, wherein excess connections are kind of pruned away. So this is also happening during development, and this neuroplasticity reduces as one ages. And but this doesn't mean that it is not happening. It's still happening, but it's much lower than what it was before. And that is very important for healthy aging. So human brain modifies, changes, and adapts continuously throughout life in response to everything we do and every experience we have. So as I said, human brain is concerned with survival. But as I told, we also have another dimension within us, which is non-physical in nature. So that's the dilemma most human beings have. So there are two dimensions. One is concerned with survival, which is basically the preservation of the body and passing of the genetic information to the next generation, and it obeys the physical laws of existence. But there is also another dimension which wants to expand. So basically there is a dimension which is non-physical, but this non-physical dimension is bound by the physicality of who we are, and this non-physical wants to come into the fore. It wants to expand to the point of yoga, and that's the longing which every human being has for expansion, to breaking limitations. That's the reason we don't like limitations. We don't like being chained by many things, and this is because of this non-physical dimension of who we are. And this is what is called as self-actualization in psychology, which is fulfillment of the highest of who we are. And it's called as yoga, it's called as freedom, different terms in different traditions, but it's the same dimension of non-physicality. And this is also the dilemma between what we consider as materialism and spirituality. So materialism is concerned with the physical aspects, and spirituality. So nobody is only materialistic or only spiritual. Everybody has these two things, but maybe somebody is stuck with the material aspects of their life and not realize that there is also another dimension with them. Yes. And as I told, the entire problem is coming with the senses being outward bound. So senses are outward oriented, and this is for survival. That's the reason we can see what's happening around, but we can't see what's happening within us. We can close our eyes, but we can't see what's happening within, because the visual network is outward bound. Similarly, we can hear the sound of a pin falling, but we can't clearly hear our own heart beating. That's because senses are outward bound. And it's natural for the senses to be outward bound because it helps in survival, which is what we are like. The brain is the most important aspect of the brain is survival. So the only way to overcome this is to turn the senses or withdraw the senses and turn the attention inward. So this is called as pratyahara in yoga, which is one of the important limbs of yoga, which is all about shutting off the senses and focusing the attention within and focusing on what's happening within. So as I told, brain has no direct access to the world. It gets its information from the five sense organs of touch, sight, smell, taste, and hearing. So this is the information which is coming from the external world. But there is also information which is entering the brain from the internal world. So this is called as interoception, wherein every moment, this is also called as, like they call it as sixth sense. That is, every moment as information is coming from the external world, information is coming from within the body. It's like if you just right now close your eyes and focus on the beating of the heart, that's because this information is being passed to the brain. Similarly, all information, if you feel hunger, you feel hunger because there's information which is going from within the body to the brain. If you feel thirsty, that's the same thing. If you feel pain in the chest, that's the same thing. If you feel stomach irritation, that's the same thing. So without this interoceptive information going to the brain, we can't survive in the world. And this is a whole range of network, especially the vagal network, which is carrying this information from the body, from within the body to the brain. And this is kind of, it penetrates every organ of the body, and it's a very deep-rooted mechanism. And you might have heard of the gut-brain axis, right? So basically, that's part of the interoceptive network, wherein the information from the gut is reaching the brain through the vagus nerve, and it can influence mood, mental health, all these things. So what we eat can influence the mental health. That's because of this network of vagal network, basically. And this extroceptive, so the information from the world is called as extroception. That is information from the world through the senses. So this extroception and the interoception, they act in a coordinated manner and create thoughts, they create emotions, they create perception, experience of life. Everything is based on this two fundamental things now within us. So how does it happen? We will look at it. So basically, how is this happening is, if we take the example of the mind. So what we consider as mind is basically this. Information is coming. The only way information can enter us is through the five sense organs. And these five sense organs, whenever they transmit the information to the brain, or we can say mind, this matter, it leaves an imprint in the mind. So basically, it leaves a trace of memory in the mind. And this trace of memory or imprint in the mind, when it happens over and over again, it becomes a pattern kind of thing. And this pattern turns into tendencies, the likes, dislikes kind of thing. And then over a period of time, it becomes personality. So what we call as personality right now is basically all this information, sensory information, which is entering us from the time of birth, in sleep and in wakefulness. So even in sleep, this information is reaching the mind. There's no basically break for how mind is being shaped every moment. And this makes mind very flexible. This makes mind dynamic in nature. It is not like, my mind is this, my personality is this. It's not like that, but rather it's constantly being shaped. So even right now, as you're listening to me, there's a lot of your mind is being shaped. There are some connections being formed in the brain, and your mind is being shaped, and you're probably tending to think a little more about yoga because of this talk. So your mind is being shaped, and this is still happening. I would say it's not unconsciously, but it's kind of happening still unconsciously, because you are still it's not unconscious, it's basically conscious. You've chosen to listen to me right now, so it's a conscious choice you have made, and because of which the mind is being shaped in a particular manner. But this, throughout the day, if you look at it, the mind is being shaped mostly unconsciously. We spend most of our lives in an autopilot mode or an automatic way of living. So basically, research shows that almost 50 to 75% of our everyday life is spent in mind wandering states or in an autopilot mode of living. So if most of the time is spent in that autopilot mode or an unconscious state, the mind is also being shaped unconsciously. But we have a choice wherein we can choose to experience things consciously. We can choose to move around consciously. We can choose to do everything that we're doing consciously. So in this manner, we can shape the mind the way we want it in a very conscious manner. And this mind is also being shaped by the interoceptive information. So basically what's happening is that everything that's happening right now is based on the previous life experiences. So basically all the impressions that have been carried to the mind, the current context and affect, which is feeling within. And this constructs present moment experience. So I can, to just make it clear, I can give an example about say anger. So somebody talks badly to us in a very angry tone. The unconscious reaction that moment is to reciprocate, like to reply back in the same tone, reply back in anger, or to get upset by what the person has said. So in this simple process, there's a lot that's happening. So if we break this down, we know what anger is because of our previous life experiences. So if we had never encountered anger in our life, say never seen a movie which showcases anger, or never have had experiences of parents, friends, colleagues, whoever it is, displaying anger, we don't have this pattern within us. And if there is no pattern as such, how we react in that moment would be totally different compared to having this experience of anger previously and now responding like that. So, and then it also depends on the current context. What is the context? What is who is the person? What is the context? So if say it's an interview room and the interviewer is speaking in that tone, probably we would not reciprocate in the same tone because of the context. The context is job, it's important for me. But if it is some other place wherein there is no consequence of my action to a great extent, then probably the anger surfaces and it gets expressed. So the context is important. And the most important thing is the affect, which is the feeling within. So in that moment, if the person is really feeling well within, like really pleasant within, even if somebody comes and shouts at the person, the reaction wouldn't be in anger, because that person is already feeling really well within. So, and among in all these three, affect is the most important thing, which decides the present moment experience. So that's the reason we have focused on how having a pleasantness of experience within, which is not influenced by anything on the outside, is so important. And if unconscious, past constantly shapes the present moment experience and thus the future. So in that, again, if I go back to that example of anger, if somebody says something in an angry tone to us or misbehaves, if we are unconscious, we are letting the past run through us that moment. But rather, if we choose to remain conscious, even if, say, anger arises within us, we can choose not to express that anger, but rather, just watch that anger come and go, kind of thing. That's what happens, like with the practice of meditation, wherein you come to a point wherein you are having those emotions, not suppressing them, but rather observing them non-judgmentally. And that's one part of Buddhism as well, which focuses on non-judgmental awareness of what's happening within us. So if conscious, we can choose how to respond that moment. So the anger arises, probably we could transform that anger into something else and respond very consciously that moment. So if we are living consciously, every moment can be lived the way we want to live, instead of letting the past patterns decide the current moment experience and thus shape the future. So that's the freedom which is there for every human being. Only thing is, it needs to be tapped into and expressed. So this is how present moment is constructed. And this, as I told, pleasantness is very important because it shapes every experience of life. And how do we feel within ourselves is the most important aspect of our lives. And the quality of our life is dependent on this intrinsic feeling of pleasantness within. And with this thing, we will go into well-being, but not in this part, the future parts. So right now, as I told, what we consider as myself right now in most people's experience is body, mind, which is thought and emotion, and energies, or the three bodies which we talked about: the physical body, the mental body, and the energy body, which is the physical dimension of who we are. So yeah, this I talked about. So the physical dimension of who we are. So we can break that down into different components. The physical well-being, which is basically at the level of body, or at the level of the Annamaya Kosha, or the physical body. And there is mental well-being, which is at the level of the mind, thought. We can say thought or intellect. And the emotional well-being, which is at the level of emotions, and spiritual well-being, ecological well-being, and social well-being. And all these things happen not independently. They are very closely connected. So it's just for the sake of understanding and just for the sake of breaking it down, just to make things more clear, rather, we are breaking it down into these components. And this is the mistake which the West has done for a very long time. They have broken down body and mind. That's the mind-body duality, which has been part of psychology for a very, very long period of time, from the time of Descartes, wherein they treated body and mind separately, and they did not realize the links between the body and mind, or the mind-body connection. So what we are looking at is not that. This is to make it very clear that we are breaking it down only for the sake of understanding, and always keeping in mind that these are interlinked. So say what happens at the level of body influences the mind to a great extent. The food we eat, the sleep we have, the physical activity, everything influences the mind. So I've talked about the gut-brain axis, which is the links between what we eat and the mood and mental health. Similarly, how our mind is influences the body. So if our mind is in a pleasant state, actually, the body is more energetic. It is more flexible actually, when the mind is more joyful and happy. And at the same time, emotions and thoughts are also very closely linked. How one's emotions are determine one's thoughts, and how one's thoughts are determine one's emotions. And this emotions and thoughts are also very, very strongly rooted in the body. That is, I've spoken about interoception, right? That is the information from the body which is going to the brain. This interoceptive information plays a very crucial role in emotions and eliciting thoughts and everything. So this whole thing about thought and emotion, as being distinct is not very right. They are very, very closely connected. And then spiritual well-being, if physical, mental, emotional, and also the energy aspect, if they are taken care of, then a dimension within which is non-physical comes into one's experience. This is called as the spirit. This is when spiritual well-being happens. And for that to happen, only way is to work on these four aspects of body, thought, emotion, and energy. When these are properly aligned, that's when this dimension of non-physicality comes into one's experience. And once that happens, that is the point where there can be no suffering, because suffering is happening at the level of the mind. And the only way one can transcend suffering is to transcend the mind. There's simply no other way actually. And then ecological well-being, which is also, it's like actually not right to say ecological well-being, because when a person is in an inclusive state of experience, automatically ecology comes into one's experience. Like there's nothing like, me and the nature. Like there's a very strong deep connection and interaction between oneself and natural environment. So ecological well-being also, it just happens. And also social well-being, which is basically how we connect with people around us, the kind of networking, interactions, etc. And this also depends on how we feel within ourselves. So when we feel really good within ourselves, the entire social networking, the interactions become really, really pleasant. At the same time, it is not dependent on the networking. The well-being is not dependent on the networking. I'm not making these networking to feel good within, but rather I feel good within and then make interactions. So this is the crucial point actually. I feel good within and I do things on the outside, versus I do things on the outside to feel good within. So there's a whole it's a whole different aspect which will change everything actually. So, and that's the entire focus of the yogic methods and yogic practices, to create that pleasantness within, so that everything else happens like very effortlessly, and it just action happens as required of the situation. So that this is what we will be talking about in detail in the next 3 parts, wherein the next part will focus on the mental and emotional well-being. The part after that, physical well-being, where we'll talk about food, what to eat, how to eat, when to eat, fasting, the science of fasting, gut-brain axis, all these things. And then we will, the last part, which is the 5th part, will focus on the spiritual well-being and the ecological well-being, and also the implications of this on various mental issues, mental health issues like stress, anxiety, depression, everything. And yeah, I think like we are on time. Yep, thank you so much. If you have any questions, I can take.
Very well explained, Saketh. I've enjoyed going through the session, though I missed the part one. So is the part one recording available somewhere?
Yeah, it's there in YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, it's recorded.
Yeah, you can just check BITSAA Sahaaya playlist. Meanwhile, I'll share the link.
No, go to BITSAA International. You go to BITSAA International, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
into that BITSAA Sahaaya playlist.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, any actually I have, as I told, I said I would be also talking about a little bit of my own subject experience. So I have been practicing meditation now for the last 7 years, and what happens is in this whole practice, a point comes wherein in one's awareness, one clearly knows what is me and what is not me. So right now, in most people's experience, me is the mind. But what happens through practice, through sadhana, is that a point comes wherein you know what is you and what is not you. So you realize that you're not the mind. So basically, there's a distance between oneself and one's mind. And this is called as cognitive distancing, experiential diffusion in psychology. So in usual states, it's the experiential fusion which happens, which is basically the fusion of oneself with one's mind. So when this fusion is there, what's happening at the level of the mind influences one. And with meditation practice, this fusion becomes diffused, and that's the point which you become an observer of your mind, and you can witness your mind as you say probably witness the person in front of you. So in the third person perspective kind of thing, and that's the point when beautiful things happen. Yeah. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, have any questions?
I think Soumitra
posted something in the comments. Yeah, I'll read it. She said, from the last part, you said that there were ways to switch our status of affection.
Affection? Switches? Okay. Okay, affect. Yes, definitely. And that basically the sense of feeling within, say I'm feeling crappy right now. Is it possible for me to switch that state to something pleasant? Yes, it is definitely possible without an external stimulus, definitely. So as I told, the entire practices of yoga is to create the pleasant chemistry within. So for example, you're feeling really dull, really crappy within, you just do certain practices and then the entire chemistry changes. And this doesn't happen like, this doesn't mean that you just learn the practice and you do it, it happens. It doesn't happen like that, but rather it takes some time to come to that point wherein if you just do it right manner, it just creates that pleasant chemistry within. So you can just change it just like that. Actually, probably within 15 to 20 minutes, you can change the whole dynamics of the interception. And there is like proper scientific evidence for how it happens actually. Yes, so you can switch your affect state. I would be talking about the science of these methods, but I won't be talking about the methods themselves. There are a lot of methods actually. You could just look out yourself. I could also definitely provide you certain inputs, but there are many methods, both in the Buddhist tradition as well as in the yogic tradition.
At least pointing us to those methods would be useful.
Yeah, come again.
I said pointing us to those methods would be useful
Yes.
so that we can follow.
Definitely, I would be providing some resources, which can be like it's more like setting off on this journey. Resources for that. Yes, definitely. There are many resources actually which I've compiled. If you can provide your email address, I can mail that to you.
Maybe we can publish it online, Saketh, on the website. That might be helpful as well. Yeah, we can do that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think Samitra's question is answered. I had a question for you, Saketh. If you go back to that graph on neuroplasticity, right? I was curious about just like the very end of the graph. It showed actually like, see that the blue line, I'm not talking about the dotted line, I'm talking the original blue line. It actually shows going up towards the end. I mean, in general, you mean that after a certain age, your neuroplasticity actually increases, and it's lesser during a part of like say your midlife. Is that what it's trying to portray?
So I exactly don't know what the authors are trying to tell in this, but based on my other understanding, what happens is that so midlife is the time wherein a lot of things actually go wrong in most people's lives, and as one ages, there is a certain, it's because of probably retirement, probably because of more time to take care of oneself. They start investing in their own well-being again. And
so are you saying that okay, so maybe the stress reduces,
there's more wisdom, there's more life experiences. Okay. Probably because of that, it increases a little in the 60s and probably 50s, 60s, 70s.
Okay, but that also has to do with healthy aging, right? It's not necessary, right? Okay.
It has to do with healthy aging.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just curious about that. But now what you said makes sense. It's possible that, after you turn 60, 65, you probably have less responsibilities. Your kids have grown up.
Yes.
And you basically don't have stress as much on a daily basis. That probably makes a huge difference.
Yes, and
people also turn to spiritual practices more towards then.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
They become more. They start investing in yoga and all those things. Probably more in that age.
That is true. My parents have started yoga. Much more now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, if there's no more questions, I think we can close the session?
Yeah, I'm looking at the resources thing. Can we share
Yeah.
slide here? Because I have one slide on the resources.
Yeah, you're still sharing the screen, Saketh.
Not sharing this. Okay. Can we share in the chat box the resources thing? Can we add an
No, I'm not understanding your question.
No, can we add an attachment in the chat box?
Yes, you can actually put an attachment in the chat box. Just go to chat.
Okay,
So click
Okay,
beside the
I got it.
emoticons. There is there's
I
that
got it.
folder thing. Yeah. But either way, what we'll do is we'll intend to put all the resources on the BITSAA Sahaaya page also.
Yeah, I just shared one slide on that. So this is as a beginning thing, and probably after that you could explore more.
Cool. Hardik, maybe we can upload this on the website. I think you'd have
we can do that.
access, right? You have admin access as well, yeah?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right. So with that, thank you everyone for joining in. I know we went over time, but this has been a trend with BITSAA Sahaaya webinars. It was a great learning session. Thank you, Saketh, for providing all the amazing insights. And we look forward to the next session in the series.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Divya. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Saketh.
everyone.
Thank you, sure.
And thanks, Hardik, as always, for the logistics.
Yeah, thank you, Hardik. Thank you, Divya.
Bye.
Has everyone downloaded this?
Yeah, I'm sure they've downloaded it. I've downloaded it as well. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Sure, then, yeah.